And it's BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, everybody, and welcome to this special weekend presentation of Black Box Online Radio. My name is Black Box Ned, and I am your host. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop something down below if you have something to say. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about some of the recent news involving the DB Cooper mystery. Every Friday, I do a segment for Black Box Online Radio called Cooper Friday, where I explore that case. And this week, I really had a very big divide because I wanted to talk to you guys about the recent news and respond to some of the videos and media content that has been coming out about DB Cooper. But I also wanted to do the episode on the film, The Pursuit of DB Cooper, a movie from 1981. And I chose the movie for the Cooper Friday segment. But I figured there's enough time on Sunday for us to sit down and have a discussion about the content that has come out here on YouTube. And in this video specifically, I'm going to be responding to the latest live stream from Eric Ulus, as well as the DB Cooper Sleuth interview with Larry Carr. It was conducted by Ryan Burns on his DB Cooper Sleuth channel, and he has also released a couple new videos. And even on the Cooper Vortex, we have new content coming out. And one thing that has been released over there, I believe at least 2 episodes have come out at the time of this recording in between my last live streams. But there's a new DB Cooper book club discussion that is happening, and the guest that was interviewed was named Nicole Legg. So thank you so much for joining me here. And we have some people coming in. We have Batman66 saying, Viva el Nedo. Muchas gracias, Senor Batman. And you got to cheer with some orange is the new black coffee. Although I'm only taking a sip because this is pretty hot. Join Jen says, no sports, please. Cooper. I don't even really follow the sports. I don't even think I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. I was talking to some people about that. And yes, this is the time for a new year. This is the start of 2025. January was one long month, but we are into February now. And maybe one of these days we will see the DB Cooper mystery being solved. Mystery Junkie is here. Whose identity is more likely to be found one day, Zodiac or DB Cooper? Absolutely DB Cooper for the stuff that we're going to talk about in this episode. Scott Bobbitt is here, says, yo, back to you, Scott. Fire Pixie is here, hello. And Dark Side of the Moon says, Ned, Fire Pixie, Bobbitt, Scott, and Join Jen. Hello. Thank you so much, Dark Side. So why don't I begin with the interview that was done with Larry Carr on the DB Cooper Sleuth channel. Larry Carr was the investigating FBI agent that was assigned to the DB Cooper case. On November 24th of 1971, a man boarded a plane using the name Dan Cooper when he purchased his ticket. He was carrying what appeared to have been a bomb, and he held everyone on the plane hostage. He skyjacked the plane, and he demanded $200,000 and 4 parachutes as the ransom. And then he ordered the plane to take off, heading toward Reno, Nevada, and he jumped out of the plane into the night with the parachute and the money, never to be seen or heard from again. Larry Carr ultimately took over the case, and he appeared on Ryan Burns' DB Cooper Sleuth channel. And he was telling everyone about his investigation. And I want to focus on the observations that he's made, the bold claims. Because this guy, DB Cooper, jumps out of the plane at 10,000 feet. Number one, both Ryan Burns and Larry Carr were in agreement that DB Cooper did not land in a river. And this is very important because we have multiple rivers that are in the area, the Columbia River, the Lewis River, and maybe even the Washougal. But they said he didn't land in the river because I think they're doing this based on timing. Now, it's a very bizarre statement because a lot of the mainstream DB Cooper sources are all about this theory. That's what they think happened to DB Cooper, that he either landed in the river or in Lake Merwin. And that's the narrative that they try to present. The reason why Cooper was never found is because he couldn't pull his ripcord, and then he just goes into the water, and then he gets dragged around by boats. Ryan Burns and Larry Carr were both saying that, no, that didn't happen. And I think they're doing this based on timing, and they're doing this based on the expected drop zone, and also the evidence that would have resurfaced. Now, I mean, this is really just challenging to a lot of the points. Oh, and the Fire Pixie says, yes, hit the like button. It is free. Thank you so much. Mary J is here. Hello. And the next statement, which I think is much bolder, is Larry Carr made the claim that DB Cooper had no idea where he was in the sky. When D.B. Cooper chose to make the jump, he couldn't have possibly known where he was. Now, why would he say that? Well, this was based on a series of, I guess you would say, estimations by Larry Carr, for lack of a better term, or he's trying to interpret the evidence, interpretations rather. He claimed that D.B. Cooper was not asking questions about the location of the plane, therefore, he couldn't have known where he was. And I think that's a very bizarre statement to say. And Larry Carr clarified later on by saying that in 1971, we have the Cooper skyjacking, but in 1972, we have the McCoy skyjacking committed by Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. And McCoy was able to roughly know where he was because he jumped rather close to his home, his desired drop zone, because he was asking questions to the flight crew about the location of the plane. And Cooper wasn't doing that. I do not like this explanation at all. I do not even think that this is an appropriate explanation. Is there not another way to know where someone is in the sky without asking questions to the flight crew? Where are we now? What are we passing over? What's that down below? Is there not another way to do that? I mean, let's say, how about just you could do it based on guesswork alone. Absolutely, you could. You could do it with other types of instruments, but I mean, it would be somewhat possible for Cooper to know where he was, relatively speaking. I mean, we're not talking about landing on the exact millimeter of soil that he wanted to land on, no, but in a relative area, if the plane is flying south from Seattle toward Reno. Let me ask you guys, everybody in the chat right now, challenge question. How long does it take for a Boeing 727 to fly from Portland to Seattle? Everybody, if you have an answer, and every flight's going to be different, but roughly, I guess a better one would be, well, firstly, I just want to see your responses. How long does it take for a Boeing 727 to fly from Portland to Seattle? Scott Bobbitt says 30 minutes. Batman66 says half an hour. Right. If I recall, then it was an estimated 36 minutes, or the flight was supposed to be 36 minutes from Portland to Seattle. And then, they had their little events that were taking place, and then they're flying back down toward Reno. So already Cooper knows how much time it takes to get from Portland to Seattle. And yes, the plane is flying to Reno, not back to Portland, but does that not give him some reference point? Saying there's no possible way he could know where he is. How about that? And also, even Ryan Burns brought this up, that when someone walks down the back aft staircase prior to the jump, they can see city lights. And we know this from the copycats, from the other skyjackers in the 1970s. They can see city lights and landmarks before they are in the air. So that can also allow them to know roughly where they are. And Larry Carr also said something that was, really interesting, because he's like, D.B. Cooper could not have had an accomplice because there would be no way to communicate with the accomplice. Okay. But in this same interview, the FBI agent who was assigned to the case also said that, well, even if he had jumped and he was trying to get to the nearest town, that would be like walking for a mile. Walking for 1 mile, huh? Walking for 1 mile. Let's say if Cooper did not break his legs, walking for 1 mile. I think that sounds rather doable, partially because I just watched the film The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper that features that exact scenario. Cooper lands, not at the exact place that he wanted, not on the exact millimeter of Earth, as I said, but then he lands and he walks to his desired location. And in the movie, they were saying that D.B. Cooper had a Jeep, and then he drove to somewhere that was relatively near Tina Bar, where he stashed money and intentionally dropped it as a red herring. Although in the movie The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper, he threw the money in the river, whereas I think the money at Tina Bar was intentionally buried. And then we have Tim Star here, some things in the chat. Sounds like a military man who was used to escaping unknown terrain, especially at night, and therefore didn't care where he landed as long as he was heading in the right direction. Could be. That's one possibility. I just wanted to put forward the case that Cooper could have known where he was, relatively speaking, in several different ways. Mary J says, right, Cooper ordered a much less specific flight route, but depending on his equipment knowledge and experience and observations, he could have made a shrewd guess. He could have made a shrewd guess. No matter what your theory is, I want to put it forward that it should be possible for Cooper to know where he was. All right, so on the Cooper Friday segment here on Black Box Online Radio, I've talked to you guys about several different things recently. This segment began talking a lot about the suspects. Then it morphed into, okay, let's look at what happened with some of the psychological aspects. Then what happened with the events following the skyjacking? Like, what did DB Cooper do with the money? I have an episode on that. I have a whole episode on the money find at Tina Bar. And for this year, 2025, I also want to look at some more technical things that I have to read up on. And that would be the flight path, for example. I would love to do a deep dive analysis into the flight path, the drop zone. Those could be two separate episodes of Cooper Friday. So a lot to look out for here on Black Box Online Radio. But I would love to know your responses to anything here in the that it's been discussed so far about Larry Carr's interview. If you want to challenge me on any of these observations that I've made, please go for it. And I also want to make it clear that I am not a DB Cooper expert. I am a newcomer to this case. I followed the Cooper case less than the other stories here on Black Box Online Radio, like Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer, and soon I'll be doing the JonBenet Ramsey segment. I followed those for much longer. So I'm sharing these findings as initial responses, if you will. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you guys about is the live stream that was done on Eric Ulus's channel. And I follow a lot of the DB Cooper Sleuth channel episodes. I follow a lot of the Cooper Vortex podcasts. But I really haven't talked to you guys a lot about the live streams that are done by Eric Ulus, who is a very prominent DB Cooper sleuth and researcher. So his episode was pretty good, actually. I thought it was very informative. And also, I really appreciated that he said something about how he likes to do his episodes unscripted because there's a nicer flow. Thank you, thank you. I thought I was the only one. No, I'm joking. But that's why I do it this way on Black Box Online Radio. I could just type something out, and I could even use text to voice and just have some type of computer-generated voice reading my scripts. But I like to talk to you guys, and that's the heart and soul of Black Box Online Radio. So some of the points that are shared from Eric Ulus. In fact, I think the three biggest things that Eric Ulus is famous for is looking at certain possibilities for solving the case. And he looks at the tie. DB Cooper left behind his tie on the plane, a clip-on tie with a mother-of-pearl tie pin, and the tie contained metallic particles. Almost every time I watch something from Eric Ulus, he's talking about metallic particles on the tie. The second is Eric Ulus is someone who talks about how there could be a possibly different flight path that was used than some of the other more conventional theorists. Most people believe the flight path was documented. He's saying, no, maybe the pilots altered the flight path. So the tie particles and the flight path. And the third one, of course, is bringing Vince Peterson forward as a DB Cooper suspect. In this most recent live stream, Eric Ulus was talking about how one of the particles was re-examined on DB Cooper's tie. And to be clear, there are about 100,000 microscopic particles that were found. But this specific particle contained uranium and thorium put together. It's a uranium-thorium particle. And he openly said, this is pointing away from his suspect, Vince Peterson. In fact, for the longest time, Eric Ulus was saying he thought that DB Cooper was working for Remcrew, Crucible Steel, Remcrew Titanium, something like that. But he's like, wait a second, if there's uranium and thorium, or this uranium-thorium particle, that doesn't necessarily sound like Remcrew. Instead, that sounds like a company called Union Carbide, and some place that would be working with that. So maybe DB Cooper was not necessarily a titanium expert or a metallurgist. Maybe he was some different type of scientist. And more importantly, he was like, this stuff is just not looking like it's Vince Peterson anymore. And Eric Ulus has been praised by a lot of people for this. A lot of people don't like his observations. A lot of people don't like his obsession with the tie. They don't like his obsession with the flight path. But the things that Eric Ulus does receive praise for is he's willing to back down from a suspect. He's willing to admit that, hey, yeah, I think I was wrong about this guy. He did that once very publicly with Sheridan Peterson as a DB Cooper suspect. And now maybe even doing that with Vince Peterson, saying the evidence is pointing in a different direction. It's not this person. Okay, so I want to look at some of the things that you guys have in the chat here. And Tim Starr says it was $6,000. The CIA buried money on beaches for their operatives to pick up. That's one possibility. Oh yeah, somebody was saying that in the in another comment that it's widely reported that it was $5,800 that was found at Tina Bar, but they're saying it's actually $6,000. And Don Spain says he may have had a walkie-talkie in his mysterious bag, therefore he wouldn't need a precise landing, so he could contact a partner. Perfect. Brilliant. Do we not have another possibility on how DB Cooper could have had an accomplice? Anyone who says it's impossible, it's possible. And AA says, I think he had a wig on standby and threw it on with a pair of heels upon landing. AA, is your suspect Barb Dayton, perhaps? Possibly. Rob21 says, I feel that there are plenty of photos that would have been taken at the departure airport due to the novelty of flying at the time. Was this avenue explored? You know, I've thought about that, Rob21. I really have thought about that because you would think that there must be something about DB Cooper's in the background of somebody's photo, even if it's just DB Cooper walking by with his mystery bag and briefcase. I've really thought about that. You would expect that something like that would have taken place. And we have a super chat from Batman66. Thank you so much for that. And anybody can contribute with the super chats here on YouTube, also using the super thanks, but I appreciate that from Batman66. Fire Pixie says, do we even know if the tie clip was his, or did he pick it up at a secondhand store or borrow it from someone? In Eric Ulis's live stream, he just said he wanted to take those assumptions off the table and think about how DB Cooper actually owned the tie, and it was his, and it could be just going in a completely different direction. And now you're looking at a company that works with uranium and thorium in the state of Tennessee, actually, as opposed to Remcrew titanium in Pennsylvania. So I think that it's definitely an avenue worth exploring if you can narrow it down. But Eric Ulus did say one thing. He is 100% certain that Cooper worked for this company, Union Carbide, again, because of the particles on the tie. The follow-up with that was, and everybody, wait for this. The way he approaches a true crime case is, first you take the evidence you have, and then you explore the pathways, and then that leads to theories. Evidence that you have ultimately leading to theories. That makes sense, right? Wrong. I hope I misunderstood that. I hope I didn't hear that right. Take the evidence you have and you do some steps along the way and that gets you to a theory? Nope. I did that for years. I did that on Black Box Online Radio. Well, I'm going to look at the evidence that has been presented by person A. I'm looking at the evidence presented by person B. Well, you know, this evidence that's presented by person A, that makes sense. Oh, I just had my own idea. I just had my own theory, my own hypothesis. And most of the time, you're going to be wrong. I'm sorry, my friends. How about this? And this is what I learned the hard way by exploring these unsolved mysteries. Not the evidence leading to a theory. The evidence that you have should lead to stronger evidence. The evidence that you have should lead to more convincing evidence. And the more convincing evidence should lead to proof. Absolutely. Get stronger and stronger pieces of evidence. One way to do this would be, all right, so you got this uranium thorium particle on the tie. You start looking at the company. And then maybe you find out who would have had access to the types of uranium, thorium. Then you narrow it down. You get the list smaller. Then maybe you have a DNA match between person A and the part and the tie pin, something to that effect. And I know that's what Eric Ulus is ultimately trying to do, but not in theory, in practice. I mean, you can do all the types of mental gymnastics that you want, all the types of rationalization that you want. And then you're going to be stuck with a suspect that most likely was not DB Cooper. And I mean, you guys can dispute that with me if you want in the chat. In the chat, I would love to know. But I mean, if you think that there's a better way to approach true crime cases, but as I say, the evidence should lead to stronger evidence, which should lead to proof. Timstar 510 says maybe he just transported waste material. The tie is incredibly dirty. That was something that was almost brought up. Like, let's just say, Tim, the possibility of contaminants. They're like, what if he was just touching some type of metallic surface that was not in a place where he worked? I mean, what if the metallic surface was just in a place that was not completely domestic to him, for lack of a better term? Yes. I mean, this doesn't necessarily mean he worked at the company. Batman66 says, I hold zero stock in DB Cooper's recent tie results. It was probably handled by everyone and their mother-in-law back then. Well, one of the people I think handled it was Tom K. When they actually found DNA on the tie, it belonged to Tom K. Don't quote me on that, because that could be something different. Mary J says, people are still looking through old airport photos, but nothing has come up yet. I'm kind of surprised that they haven't, because there really weren't that many people on the plane that day. And this is something that was also brought up, even though this is Thanksgiving Eve, November 24th, 1971. There really weren't a lot of people on that airplane. And also, they think that DB Cooper was the only person who sat in his seat that day. And they also talked about how, this is on from Larry Carr, DB Cooper's touching all kinds of things. There's a magazine in front of the seat that he was touching, and also the seat rest. If he's the only person to sit in that seat, touching like the armrests on the seat, then they have partial fingerprints there, but nothing to put together a full fingerprint profile. They don't really have very strong fingerprint evidence. But the strongest piece of evidence to solving the case may have actually been the hair from DB Cooper that was left behind on the headrest. And that hair slide has been lost. We don't necessarily know if it's been destroyed, but it's been lost. So this is something else that was also shared, is that the flight attendants reported that the headrests on the seats were changed daily, meaning that if they had taken that hair sample from the headrest, and DB Cooper is the only person sitting in that seat, most likely that's his. And I would say yes. I mean, if he's the only person sitting there, and if they're telling the truth and the seat headrests are changed daily, that could have been the strongest piece of evidence in solving the case, well beyond metallic particles on the tie. I mean, you guys have already brought up 5 or 6 examples about how and why these metallic particles might be a dead end. Number 1, it wasn't his tie. Number 2, he didn't actually work at that place. Number 3, uranium and thorium might not be the best way to solve the DB Cooper mystery. Mary J says, oh yeah, I read that one from Mary J. Eric L. Ned, what up? Can't ever believe Cooper got away. Oh, hey, Eric, how you doing? I can't really believe that Cooper got away either. And I think that the biggest reason for this is that the other copycats didn't get away, like McCoy, for one, Paul Sini, another one. And this is also something that I just think goes to show that Cooper was smart. Cooper was smooth. And he was also probably very fortunate. And also, he probably did do some risky things. Walter's here. Hey, Ned. Walter, long time. How you doing? Walter, you get a cheers with some Orange is the New Black coffee. Now, I told you guys that there was a third thing that I wanted to discuss with you on this live stream, and that was the most recent Cooper Vortex episode. And that's hosted by Darren Schaefer. And, if you haven't subscribed yet to Darren Schaefer's YouTube channel, I invite you to do so, please. It's very, very good content. And he had made a recent post on Facebook about how he was looking for somebody to do a type of DB Cooper book club. And even behind me, you can see the book, This Skyjacker, right here. That is going to be one that I'm going to be exploring here on Black Box Online Radio in the future. And ultimately, he was saying not a lot of people took him up on the offer to do a type of DB Cooper book discussion that was spanning across the library of DB Cooper books. I gladly would have, except I really haven't read too many books on DB Cooper. A few, but not enough to participate in a discussion like that. Maybe the Zodiac Killer. Not even Jack the Ripper, though, because the Jack the Ripper books that I've read are all across the spectrum in random places, whereas the Zodiac Killer, I've gone through some of the more famous ones. But somebody did take him up on this, and that person's name was Nicole Legg. And here's a challenge question for you guys. Do you agree or disagree with this statement that was made by Nicole Legg on the Cooper Vortex? All the famous DB Cooper suspects are interesting. Do you agree or disagree? All the famous DB Cooper suspects are interesting. When I heard that on the Cooper Vortex, I had to sit back and think for a second. Is that really true? Are they all interesting? Yeah, mostly. I really can't think of a single DB Cooper suspect that I would say is not interesting. No, I don't like them all. No, absolutely not. I do not think they were all good people. I am not admiring all of them, but are they all interesting? Mary J says so many fascinating characters. Yes, but fascinating for different reasons. For example, we have the DB Cooper suspect, John Emil List. He was a terrible person. He murdered his whole family. He was a family annihilator. But I made an entire episode about him here on Black Box Online Radio, talking about a combination of the DB Cooper crimes as well as the John Emil List murders. I thought that there was enough substance material there to make an episode about him. That should mean that to a certain extent, I think that he is interesting. I think that he has a story that is worth exploring in the same way that we explore other true crime cases. And then you also have suspects like Walter Recca, whom I think was on the verge of just being a con man, or at the very least a habitual liar, maybe even a narcissistic liar. Walter Recca is someone whom I absolutely think was not DB Cooper, but he has one of the most interesting stories in the entire Vortex. So I would like to know what you guys think about this one here. And Don Spain says they would almost have to be interesting to look at daring suspects, to be the daring suspects of the crime. Yes, Don, they would have to be interesting to become a suspect in the crime. Yes, I think with the DB Cooper case, sure. With the Zodiac killer mystery, no. Are there Zodiac killer suspects that are not interesting people? No. And I say this out of respect and love. People like William McDuff Andrew. He was just a member of the Department of Corrections of California for 31 years. Did he kill anybody? I don't think so. That's all we know. In the Jack the Ripper case, no. You got people like Montague John Brewitt. He was a troubled 31-year-old man who lost his job and committed suicide. Gets accused of being Jack the Ripper. I don't see an interesting story there. Nothing against those men. They didn't ask to become Zodiac Killer or Jack the Ripper suspects. That's my response. But yes, the DB Cooper suspects are interesting people. When you look at somebody like Sheridan Peterson, he is someone who's like, no, I couldn't have been DB Cooper. Well, why not? Because at the time I was living in a mud hut in Nepal and I was writing my own book. Not to mention that Sheridan Peterson was a smoke jumper, a skydiving firefighter. All kinds of things are just connected to his story that are interesting. And I mean, no matter which DB Cooper suspect you're going to be pulling up, how about Ted Braden? We haven't mentioned him yet. He might have been the most interesting person to ever live. Mercenary Vietnam veteran, working in the Congo, let alone one of the best skydivers of his era, maybe of all time. Yes, I would like to just know the challenge. Does anybody have a DB Cooper suspect that they can think of that was not very interesting? The closest I can go with is William J. Smith, only because he just appears to be an ordinary working man that does not really seem to fit too much of the DB Cooper mold, aside from the resemblance to the composite sketch. And the family of William J. Smith ultimately rejects all this stuff about him being DB Cooper. They just think that it's untrue. But yes, there's still interesting things to explore about William J. Smith. And then David Ward says, it was the 70s. Some people built ham radios and some hijacked airlines for cash. We all need a hobby. Oh, yes, that's bad. That's bad. But it's interesting. And I think it was just airline security had these weaknesses and people were trying to exploit these weaknesses. People were taking advantage of them. It's the same way that a bank robber would be like, oh, this is when the security cameras are down. Or no, they do this in not only the military, but also in military-backed coups, like political coups. They just like, when's the shift change? When's the weak spot? When are the guards not paying attention? That's when you attack. Same story with the skyjackers. They looked for opportunities and they went with it. Now, 42 Lehman says, Happy Groundhog Day. Happy Groundhog Day to you too, 42 Lehman. I hope today won't be the same tomorrow because this morning wasn't very good. But hey, there's some orange is the new black coffee. And also, the Groundhogville in Pennsylvania, Puxatawnyville, he saw his shadow, so there's going to be 6 more weeks of winter. It is so cold in the eastern United States. Us East Coasters are dealing with the coldest of the cold, but spring is right around the corner, so they say, knock on wood and rich with possibility. Batman 66 says, the 1970s were out of sight dynamite. Red dynamite too, mind you. Tim Starr says, I have had to think that Walter Recca, as he almost certainly knew my DB Cooper suspect. Tim Starr, who's your DB Cooper suspect? On this notion of interesting DB Cooper suspects, somebody asked a challenge question in a Facebook group, which I want to throw to you. And that is, if you had the time, effort, energy, and money to do a deep dive investigation into a DB Cooper suspect, who would it be? And when I think they say money, they're talking about not only becoming a private investigator or something like that, but also getting a film crew involved. We're talking, putting the book out there. Like, if you're truly exploring a DB Cooper suspect on the big screen and the small screen, mind you, who would that be? And my response was, for the truth, Ted Braden. For entertainment, Walter Recca. Because like Walter Recca, as I said, was most likely some type of habitual liar pretending to be some type of CIA spy and so on. E. Howard Hunt could get away with that, but Recca could not. And Don Spain says, Zodiac was gutless compared to Cooper, in my opinion. The Zodiac was pretty gutless, I agree. Batman 66 says, my boy Coop had brass balls. Definitely, to a certain extent. 42 Lehman says, I don't think Christensen is interesting. Kenny Christensen, there we go. Perhaps, that's a good answer. There we go. I mean, he might have had some good World War II stories about the trainings, not about combat. But, his time in Alaska is a little bit interesting. But these guys just brought it up on the DB Cooper Sleuth channel when they're saying that Kenny Christensen was not DB Cooper. Well, why not? The core elements of evidence involving Christensen relate to the fact that it all starts with these stories from his brother Lyle. And these stories that have this type of ambiguous element to it, where he's giving this deathbed confession, but he won't say what he confessed to. Well, that doesn't mean he was DB Cooper. It just says he has a secret. So it's all just starting in the wrong place. Fair enough. But I do have a standalone episode about Kenny Christensen here on this channel. And I also have done a book discussion on Into the Blast by Skip Porteous and Robert Blevins, which explores that. Now, I told you I'm listening to this DB Cooper Book Club episode on the Cooper Vortex. And they made a statement about DB Cooper books. And they said that the book with the best cover was the one by Bill Rollins. And I know this isn't the most glamorous way of sharing, but it says, The Elusive DB Cooper, How He Escapes. That's the title of the book by Bill Rollins. And if you guys can see that, they said it's the absolute best DB Cooper book cover. And I know you can't see too well. A little better like that when I get the glare out of the way. It's like a Wizard of Oz theme with the Emerald City and a rainbow. The best cover. I absolutely despised this book cover when I saw it. Nothing against Bill Rollins. I don't know the guy. It's just a preference. But I don't even like showing it on Cooper Friday because they got the yellow brick road and a bunch of flowers and then DB Cooper's landing in the middle of it. I'm just like, I told you guys, I don't even like showing it on Cooper Friday because I think it's just overwhelmed with imagery that's just not really doing it for me. They said that was the best one ever. If I had to choose the best DB Cooper book cover ever, I'm going with DB Cooper and Me. It is about Walter Recca, and yes, I did say some things about how I don't think favorably of him about as a DB Cooper suspect, but I love the fact that it's called DB Cooper and Me, a criminal, a spy, and my best friend. And it has two people actually in the sunglass. DB Cooper's wearing his wraparound sunglasses, and there are two people that you can see. And at first you're like, well, yeah, that's DB Cooper and his best friend. But no, DB Cooper's wearing the sunglasses. So it's talk about how Cooper and the friend are within his mind, like in a memory and so on. That's why I think that's the best DB Cooper book out there. I know, and you guys, you can put your responses in the comment section down below in the live chat. What do you think is the best DB Cooper book cover out there? Don't judge a book by its cover, and you can make comments on your personal preferences about the artwork, though. And to the credit of Bill Rawlins, I do think very favorably of his material and his DB Cooper suspect, Joe Lakich. And I think that Joe Lakich is a dark horse for being DB Cooper, and I don't like using that term because a dark horse is more like what you would say is a candidate or something. I'm just saying, if it turns out that Joe Lakich was DB Cooper, I would not be surprised at all. But that doesn't mean that he has the strongest pieces of evidence. Okay, now I talked to you guys about that challenge question. If I could do the deep dive investigation into a suspect, I would choose Braden for the truth and Walter Recca for entertainment. I remembered one more statement, and that I would add to that. If I could choose a suspect other than Ted Braden to do the deep dive investigation into, where you get the time, effort, energy, and money, you get your desired amounts of that. You guys might know my answer to this already about the suspect that I would choose, Wolfgang Gossett. I would really look into Wolfgang Gossett and find out, was he actually DB Cooper? I think he had all of the points put together. And I think it's just he's not exactly a dark horse. In fact, he might be stronger than a dark horse as a suspect, plus multiple confessions that seem credible in some context. But that's why you have to do the investigation. And Don Spain says, I'm glad to catch a lie. Been following Ned for a few years now. One of my faves. Hey, Don Spain, thank you so much. You get some orange as the new black coffee. Cheers. And yes, the live streams are going to become a regular thing here again on Black Box Online Radio. Right now it is the month of February, and they will be returning in March. I am bringing back the segment True Crime Talk Radio in the morning, coming to you live every Tuesday and Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But there are going to be a lot of changes to the channel, and there's also going to be more DB Cooper content out there. For one, you guys have been asking for it. Number two, this is brand new territory for me because I really have not been following the DB Cooper case for that long. And Cooper Friday has only been going on for just under a year. It'll be a year soon. And again, I really want people to understand that these are my initial observations. These are my first chances to look at the material. Batman66 says, Yellow Brick Road, is the author trying to tell us that Elton John was DB Cooper? You made me laugh, Batman66. You're doing something right. Now I'm going to share with you guys a final observation from the Cooper Vortex. Again, hosted by Darren Schaefer, and the guest's name was Nicole Legg. And that is that Darren Schaefer said one thing he didn't like was when somebody has a suspect and they try to make the evidence fit. For example, they're looking at, say, oh, my suspect was from Nebraska, but the person who boarded the plane in 1971 was using the name Dan Cooper. That's from a comic book that is in the French language, and it's popular in French Canada and Belgium. But why would he be talking about that? Well, he was stationed on a military base in South America, and he could have been exposed to the Dan Cooper comics on that military base. Then he came back to America and became Dan Cooper. And he was just like, I don't like that type of thinking. It's like you're taking the pieces that you know, and then you're not using evidence to create stronger evidence to create proof. No, that's taking your evidence, and then you're adding in possible pieces of evidence, not confirmed pieces of evidence. And he didn't say it that way, but this is, my opportunity to provide these additives, because that's what I think is exactly what people are doing in the Zodiac case, in the Jack the Ripper case, in the DB Cooper case. They're taking real evidence, and then they add in imaginative possibilities, if you will. And I really don't know if that's the most practical way to go about solving a mystery. But we have Mary J says, That guy with the truck who would have handled waste and got it on his tie. What's his name? The singing cowboy. I know who you're talking about. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on that. The singing cowboy. And Tim Starr says Walt almost certainly knew Ted Braden. Walt jumped on numerous occasions with Ted's SOG member George's sister. Well, that's really interesting to notice about these interconnections among DB Cooper suspects. But Jerry Nurka says, "Hello, I've only watched your videos about the Zodiac, but I do think DB Cooper is very interesting. Do you think he survived the jump?" Yes, I do. And I also think that if I had to make a decision, he didn't land in the water. I don't know if I can rule it out 100% because I was watching the DB Cooper Sleuth channel once, and Jude Morrow was a presenter on there. He's the author of the book, Dan Cooper. And he was like, the money that was found at Tina Bar was analyzed, and it turned out that it had spring diatoms from the Lewis River, and it's just found on the bank of the Columbia River, mind you. The money was in multiple bodies of water at some point. If the money was in the water, then Cooper was in the water. I know that there can be additional reasons why the money can be in the water without Cooper being in the water, but I don't rule out the possibility completely. However, if I had to bet my life on it, you have your whole life to pull the ripcord, I would say that, yeah, Cooper survived the jump. He landed on the ground. People are talking about battleground orchards in Washington and somewhere in that area, and that he landed perhaps on relatively stable ground in the dark, in the rain, and then was able to get to a desired location and hurry out of there. Now, did he have an accomplice? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't dismiss that. But I think Cooper survived the jump. And I think, though, it's just so surprising to hear this stuff about how he did not survive the jump without the physical evidence. Where's the body? Habeas corpus. Mary J says, so many book covers are iconic. I like the Skyjack cover. Oh, yes, that's like starting with the basics, because I hear Darren Schaefer say this all the time, that that's the book that really pulled him into the Cooper Vortex, if you will, Skyjack. And there's another one that comes to mind that I'll try and think about in just a second, even though I showed you DB Cooper and Me. That was really off there for me. Batman66 says, sorry, Ned, there's no way Coop survived the jump. There's no way Coop survived the jump? Well, as I said, though, he may have not landed in rugged terrain. He may have actually landed on relatively flat terrain. He may not have landed in the water. He may have landed nearby a body of water. And even though it's a fictitious film, The Pursuit of DB Cooper shows it all very clearly about how, all right, he lands, he gets in a vehicle, he goes to a different part of Washington state, and he uses the Tina Bar money as a red herring. And that's all it was. So I think that that's a possibility about how everything got arranged the way it was. But at this time, I would like to turn it over to you guys. And I want you to know, and I want to know your responses. What do you think about any of the points that have been discussed in this episode? Number one, is it possible for Cooper to have landed in the water? Number two, is it possible for DB Cooper to have known where he was when he was on the plane? Number three, how valuable is it to examine the particles on DB Cooper's tie? Number four, which DB Cooper book cover do you like the most? Sure. And number five, this is the most important question for this bonus episode of Black Box Online Radio, and that is, how should we evaluate the evidence in the DB Cooper case, as well as the Zodiac Killer Mystery, Jack the Ripper, JonBenet Ramsey, the Black Dahlia, Madeleine McCann, might be one that I would come back to. How should this stuff be evaluated? I'd love to know what you guys think. You can put your ideas in the comment section down below. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My Facebook name is Ned Dahan, but there is also blackboxned88 on Instagram, blackboxned88 on TikTok, although I don't post too much on TikTok. But in March of this year, there will be a return of these shorts and reels that come out, short episodes that are 1 minute or less, coming Monday through Friday here on BBOR. You can get them on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course here on YouTube. And I'll talk to you guys about the bonus Cooper segment in the future on next week's Cooper Friday. Thank you so much for listening to my show. My name is Black Box Ned one more time, and until next time.